Hi, I'm Dr. Cindy Dupuy. I have a PhD in learning disabilities. I do diagnostic assessment, advocacy, and intervention. I'm also an adult with dyslexia and dysgraphia.
Hi, my name's Kim Sharman. I work with kids all ages with dyslexia, dysgraphia, and ADHD, and I too have ADHD.
Okay, and so we're going to look at a score profile. So we're going to put the numbers up so people can screenshot and take a look at the numbers. Um, Up and ignore that design learning there in the bottom. This is what happens when I throw numbers in quickly and it's not as clean and as well checked as it should be. So just take a minute, screenshot your numbers, sit and look at your numbers, and we're gonna then kind of dive in deep. So take as much time as you need. Um, and I'm gonna put the math up in two parts. So screenshot for the written language, and then the math bridges pages. So screenshot that. And then once you've had a chance to look at that, come back to us. Okay, so Kim, ask me your question.
Why did you choose this student results, and why do you find it so intriguing?
Because it's not your standard dyslexic kid. And most people that would look at the profile would scratch their head and go, this is weird. Does that make sense?
Because he has a very solid IQ,
He's bright,
but his scores
are all over the place.
are all over the place, and the visual process, there's some visual stuff
Okay,
going on.
so let's talk. Let's go back and call out the first thing that you called out, which was block design. Now, you'll notice a block design is in parentheses, okay?
Mhm.
Which means I did something based on professional judgment, and there are going to be people out there who watch this that completely disagree with me on this. In my mind, the block design is assessing a fundamental processing deficit for him.
Hmm.
And by using that number, it's so out of line with everything else that we're measuring his disability instead of his potential. So I made the decision to substitute figure weights
Ah,
in the calculation of his perceptual reasoning. I do not do this often. Like, this is not every other kid I'm making a substitution. This is a relatively uncommon thing to do. So you should not do this on just because you don't like one low number. Does that make sense?
so the difference between the skill set of doing figure weights versus, or skill set or disability between able to do figure weights at 91 versus
Mhm.
not being able to do block design at 16, you didn't want to skew your report so badly because
I don't want
you,
to overrepresent what he can do,
right.
but I also don't want to underrepresent what he can do. Okay.
What is the difference between figure weights and block design that makes those two so different?
Okay. So block design, you've got the geometric figure and you're putting the blocks together to look like the target, right?
Right.
Figure weights, you've got a design above and you've got 6 puzzle pieces down below, and you have to figure out which three go together to make the
Oh,
target
that's
shape.
right.
Okay.
Which seems like they should be the same, but it's
But
not.
it's not.
Why?
So in block design, he could not figure out how to orient the blocks to match the page.
Wow.
Just, you remember when you said, which you really didn't do, but you claim you did, you ran out of the room screaming and crying with the red and white blocks?
Yeah.
Okay. He killed you relative to that. Like, he struggled with the 4 block that is slightly rotated. Like, he couldn't figure out how to take what he was seeing and represent it down below.
So
Okay.
so visual is really hammered on in block design.
Yes, visual spatial processing. How do I see things in space? How can I connect things? How can I make things match when there's so many options, right? Like with block design, you've
Oh,
got four 4 rotations, right? 4,
Right.
okay?
Too
But
many
then,
options.
right. And not being able to see how it goes together. Now, this happens to be a really unique family. The father has passed this genetic difficulty on to all 3 of his kids.
Mm.
Um, I love I love him. He's an amazing parent. He's just a delightful human being.
Uh-huh.
Um, but he could not build an IKEA
Oh,
to
interesting.
save his life.
Wow.
Could not. Okay. Um, Rick George could not. Rick might be able to get through it, but it would be difficult,
Hmm.
right? How do I take what is in a two-dimensional and make it three-dimensional?
Hmm.
You know, you can watch his right hemisphere fall on the ground and start flopping around like a fish, right? If I can reason things out, I can mentally pull them together. But if I actually have to do the construction myself, I can't do it. Does that make
Interesting.
sense?
Well, yeah. I mean, and these people have to work really hard intellectually to understand how
Right,
things go together. Hmm.
right. Okay. Now,
Hmm.
obviously, the verbal comprehension skills are in great shape, but let's kind of dive in a little bit more. Design learning was absolutely fascinating. So, in design learning on the RAML, which is the wide range assessment of memory and learning, which I don't think we've talked a lot about this particular test, they put up a card and it's got a whole bunch of different geometric figures on it, triangles, ovals, circles, da 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 da, right?
Hmm.
And you get to see the card for a certain amount of time. We take it away, and then you're asked to draw what you saw on the card. It's kind of
Oh,
like
yeah.
a complex figure, but a little different. Ray complex, you actually get to just copy it, but you've got that kind of complexity of a figure, so to speak. So
Hmm.
you see it, you draw it, I take it away, I show it to you again, I take it away, you draw it again. So there's multiple trials where you get to see the design, it's taken away, and then you have to draw what you saw. Okay.
Okay.
And so in that initial training, he absolutely struggled. Like he couldn't figure out where things were in the 4 quadrants
Hmm.
and what shapes were where and why. So we had some really unique drawings. Now, what was fascinating is when we came back 30 minutes later, he crushed it. He was able to draw in a way that he hadn't drawn on any of the other trials.
How many trials was that he got to see it
I can't tell
repeated?
you that
Oh,
because I don't want to spoil the test.
okay.
Okay. It was a number of trials,
But the
more than two.
accumulation of knowledge and visual images helped him.
Right. So it was that building factor.
Ah,
Okay. You know how you and I talk about we start with a small chunk of information, we drill on it, then we add a little bit and we drill, and we add a little bit and we drill, and we add a little bit and we drill, right? He's that kind of learner.
accumulate little by little.
Accumulate little by little.
Yep.
So, for example, if this kid was going to learn to play, let's say golf, okay?
Hmm.
Um, if somebody were going to teach him to play golf, the first thing that they would do is just talk about, whacking it with a hand grip. Let's get your hand grip. Here's your initial setup for the swing. So get in that position. Okay, now let's go back. Get back in that position. Let me get you perfect every single time of where your swing start is. Okay, now that we've got that consistently, because we've done that like 10 times, now we're going to start talking about the downward stroke. We're not going to hit the ball yet.
Hmm.
Okay, and then we're going to go back and we're going to reset and we're going to get to the ball. And we're going to go back and we're going to reset and get to the ball. And we gradually build skill kind of step by step. So you
Yeah.
rehearse what you have right and add a new little chunk. Okay. So I think that's part of the reason that he did well on that. But then his design learning, and by the way, 100 with the 123, I have that in the wrong place there. Um, it's just clearing the line, and that should be a 120 or a 112, not 1124.
Yeah.
Anyway,
When you said
um,
clearing the line, he's just making it.
right at a 10, his nose is just over cutoff. Okay. Um, so that how do I remember what I see? Very much he changes a visual task into a verbal task by describing it.
You tell me I do that all the time.
Yes, you do.
Everything you're saying is
Is
how I
you.
learn.
Do you see why I pulled up this profile?
Yeah, everything you're saying is how exactly how I learn complex
Right?
things.
Okay.
But not everybody does this.
Not everybody does that.
Oh.
I don't have to do that. I can watch you do something and then replicate it.
Mm.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the attention, concentration, memory.
Oh boy.
Why number, letter, but the other ones are fine?
Well, the number letter, I don't exactly know what this. Oh, he's
So I
having.
rattle off C297A, and you would say C297A, right?
Yeah,
So
he's
why
not
is
getting.
that one harder for him than the Swiss cheese card? So finger
Yeah.
windows, you hold up a card and it's got a whole bunch of holes in it. And I
Mhm.
would take the end of my pencil and I would put it in one window and then another and then another. And once you see the sequence, you have to repeat it on your side.
Well, the number letter association in the back of his brain, he's having trouble storing. You're auditory, you're verbally saying these to him. So he has to translate your through his ears and go to the back of his brain and find the correct symbol that goes with these.
Well, no, because it's just repeat what I said. It's like digit span.
Oh, so he's having trouble with. Oh, interesting.
Okay, so look at digit span on the waist,
Yeah.
and then we go to
So
number letter on
uh
the ramble, and he tanks. Why? How
I
many
don't.
options are there in number letter?
Those are the only two options.
Well, number letter, so in digit span, there's 10 numbers, 0
Oh,
through
and
9.
we've added letters. Okay.
In number letter,
Mm.
we're now going 36.
So
Like
you've
35 because I
overloaded.
never use 0, but so we've increased the number, and then
Mhm.
we have letter names that rhyme. B, C, D, E, right?
So he's having trouble distinguishing those two.
Well, and he's trying to hold a much larger array,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. The
Yeah,
number of possibilities, right?
yeah.
With digit span, many people can create a mental whiteboard and write it in their brain, or they can repeat it fast enough.
Mhm.
And so that I think crashed him.
So
Now,
he's having trouble writing the letters and numbers in his brain,
right,
as you're
because there's
saying.
so many more options, right? And how do I get it in there, right?
Okay. Yeah.
That's one theoretical perspective. Okay.
Mhm.
Now look at this.
Wow. Wow.
Okay.
So that's a fantastic score.
Okay. But look at it relative to verbal comprehension.
Oh, it's lower. Oh,
Verbal
interesting.
comprehension is a little lower. Part of the reason he can do
Yeah.
so well on associational fluency
Uh-huh.
is because he's a highly, highly, highly verbal student. He talks
Uh-huh.
himself through everything.
Mhm.
Okay.
Interesting. So that's why this is higher. Okay.
Yeah. He also did really well on non-word repetition. Like he can repeat the gibberish back, but he had a hard time deleting phonemes and counting phonemes.
Wow. So
Okay,
phonemes are the smallest
good.
modicum, how do you say, of sound in a word.
Smallest unit of sound that has meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So like dogs or cats. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Putting the S on the end and either doing S or Z, right?
Does this
Okay.
show that he's done a lot of memorizing then, if he can't?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Memorizing words.
Okay. Now let's talk about processing speed.
Mm. Wow.
What's your initial inclination?
Well, I
Would you
mean,
say there's a processing speed processing deficit?
yeah, this is a
You would think
deficit,
so, right?
but does he have ADHD? Is this what's happening or what's happening?
He does have ADHD. He is medicated.
Okay.
Okay. But let's look at these timed subtests right here.
Okay.
So processing speed is how fast can the computer crunch data, right?
Right.
So that means if I put you under time constraints, if processing speed is truly an issue when I put you under time constraints, you shouldn't be able to do it. And he outscores his processing speed. Do you see that right here?
Yeah.
Um, in
So,
terms
so
of,
even though if you read beautifully and perfectly and you don't have dyslexia, processing speed will still show up when you make people read something really quickly? Like,
it's not a processing speed issue. Like he doesn't have a processing speed processing deficit, even though those numbers up there in the processing speed category look like it's a processing deficit.
okay, so what the heck is it?
No test measures everything, or there's no one test that measures just one thing. There's always more than one thing measured.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in letter pattern matching, you've got an array AK, AC, CA, KC, KC, and you have to find the two in the array that match and draw lines through them. Same thing with number pattern matching. You have a string of numbers, find the two that match and slash them. And then pair cancellation is find a particular sequence of pictures from three possible pictures.
This is that visual thing again.
Right? Okay, so when you look at the orthographic processing, can you recognize correct orientation? No. The visual perception looks like it's an issue. He only missed one item on the whole thing.
Hmm.
So I think that there's an orthographic processing deficit that played a role in his processing speed because his rate on the GORT is beautiful. His fluency on these silent reading tasks is great. Look at his oral fluency. So this is how many words
Wow.
can you read under a time constraint? Do you see how all of these timed measures smack down processing speed?
Mm-hmm.
On all of these timed measures, if it were processing speed, we wouldn't have scores this high.
So can you explain the term orthographic processing?
Orthographic processing is your eye's ability to recognize letter formation and orientation. So, for example, if I write a letter like that versus a letter like that, you're supposed to recognize that that one's backwards. Okay. And so when you struggle with orthographic processing, when you have an array of numbers and you have to scan across to find the one that does the exact match, right? If
Oh.
your eye is not picking up that detail, you're having a hard time finding the exact match.
And this connects directly to dyslexia, or is it or is it also dysgraphia too?
This can just be, you can have orthographic processing issues and
Period.
compensate, yeah,
Okay.
and not have it pop up in reading.
Interesting. And not have
Okay.
it pop up in reading?
And not have it pop up very much in reading. I reviewed his oral reading on the gray oral reading test. I must have listened to all of his stories like 10 times because I thought for sure it would pop. And he was accurate enough that he could get through it. Okay. So, there's little kind of on the verge of some slight dyslexia, but nothing where I'd be like, dude, let's go intervene.
Mm.
He's actually in pretty good shape, right?
Huh. That's
Okay, which then brings us to written expression. And let's go back and look at visual motor integration.
wow.
This is copying the shapes down below. Can you get your hand to do what your eye sees? And the answer is no,
Mm-mm.
which is very similar to block design. Can you get your hands to do what your eye can see, right? Different, slightly different systems in terms of One is I'm writing and one is I'm manipulating blocks. Like the
Mm-hmm.
writing one is way more complex,
Mm-hmm.
which that's a whole other story, right? But getting that copied correctly is tricky. And then in his written expression, um,
Mm-hmm.
look at that,
Wow.
right? So he makes all sorts of mechanical and grammatical errors. He doesn't have he doesn't have a solid foundation in what is a good sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't follow prompts. He tends to
Wow.
get very creative and diverge.
Yeah.
So there's one where you read a story, and then the student has to write the story from memory, including as many details. And man, he included stuff that was absolutely not in the story and got
Wow.
zero credit on that item. And then on other ones where you're prompted to write in a certain way or they're looking for a certain thing, he couldn't produce. Now, on the KTEA written expression, which is a much more structured and picture based. So here's a picture, write a sentence about the picture under these circumstances, right? He does better with that, but he makes all sorts of mechanical errors with capitalization and punctuation.
Mm-hmm.
And then he makes grammatical errors in his sentence structure with comma splices and this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So that's the dysgraphia piece. So definitely dysgraphia is there. And then the visual spatial processing. So the perceptual estimation task you would hate, Kim. I show you a picture that has got a number of objects or a quantity, and there's a number down below, and
Yeah.
then there's another picture next to it. And by looking at the first picture to get an idea of the quantity, you're supposed to predict how many is in the second picture.
So it's visual spatial. Yeah.
Okay. And so he could not do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then when we move into his math, so his fact base, like just mad minute,
Yeah.
7, not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
When we go into the knowledge task, on the knowledge tasks, they take the number sentence and turn it on its side, meaning you have like 5 plus blank equals 6, and you would have to put in a 1.
Right.
Okay. So instead of, you have to reverse the process to get the
Right.
answer. And
Good.
so he struggled with those a
Oh,
little bit in a
really?
couple of places. Yeah, with multiplication. Multiplication was not a problem, but division and subtraction were the problem. Okay.
Hmm.
But two other places that actually, a couple places that I want to call out. So forward and backward number counting. Starting at 7, count forward by twos. 7, 9, 11, 13.
Right.
Okay. And backward number counting, starting at 21, count backwards by threes. 21, 18, 15, 12, right?
Yeah. But that's hard. I mean, so that's holding pictures in your brain of,
See, I don't have to hold a picture in my brain. I can just do the math mentally,
okay.
which is not your thing.
No.
Okay. So he struggles with that. So there's an understanding of the construct of number,
Mm.
like number is a construct, base 10 is a construct. You and I have talked about base 10 in the
Yeah.
past,
Yeah.
but we'll do another piece on base 10. So his mother comments that he is in high level math, but it is all based on memorizing an algorithm for completing the calculation rather than truly deeply understanding the math. And he cannot graph to save his life.
Oh, graphing kills him. Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Which is consistent with that visual spatial processing piece, right?
Right. Hmm.
Um, equation building was also fascinating. So they give you a little story problem. Um, Sally had 200 stickers. She gave 3 of her friends 4 stickers each. Which equation shows how many stickers she gave away, right?
100 minus 12. Yeah, or whatever.
So you have to find which of the 4 equations matches that. and there's a maximum time allowed.
Was that hard for him?
So he could get it with additional time, but he can't immediately recognize the equation.
Mm. Mm.
So there's these fundamental wiring issues around math, around understanding quantity, around understanding dimension. How do I work in dimension? That is just, you know, there's your pothole that you just drop into and sometimes can't climb out of. And then in organizing longer pieces of writing, like in writing an essay,
Mhm.
he can't always figure out the organization because he
Mm.
goes stream of consciousness
Mm.
instead of kind of building concepts and
Mhm.
linking concepts together.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and you can see the algorithm here in the math computation, right? In concepts and applications, there were a couple of things like he didn't recognize coins because most kids don't use coins anymore,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Um, but has some holes and gaps in understanding quantity and measurement in decimals and things like that.
Oh.
So, really interesting profile, delightful, delightful young man, um, super compassionate. He's an amazing young man. Um, and it is quite impressive that he is doing as well as he is in math and science classes given this profile. Does that make sense?
And so what he's using is his intelligence to compensate for his orthographic processing issues and his visual spatial
And the visual
memory.
motor, yeah.
Mhm.
So I diagnosed him with orthographic processing, visual motor integration, and visual spatial processing with some weaknesses in phonological processing, right? Or phonological awareness.
Wow. So this is, and I don't usually see that on your reports. Just
Yeah,
those.
yeah. It's a really different kind of profile, which is part of the reason I pulled it up, right?
Yeah.
Um, I can do dyslexics a dime a dozen, right? But this
Yeah.
one is nuanced, and it's everybody wants to go to the name of the test and claim, oh, look, there's a visual perceptual issue. Well, there's only one missed item,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And everybody looks at processing speed and goes, processing deficit, look at those discrepancies. And you have to think about how is that shown in data, right? How
Throughout the
is,
rest of the test.
yeah. Do I see that carried out on timed measures? All
And
right,
you,
so let's talk intervention.
yeah.
What do we do intervention wise?
Wow. Um,
Let's
well,
let's talk writing first. That's the easy one, right?
well, the dysgraphia, oh my goodness. So he needs how does he do when he sounds like he has problems with dictating a story too.
Right.
Sentence.
He needs a structure and a framework to write from. Like he needs, and I don't want to say outlines because I know so many kids that absolutely hate outlines. He
Mhm.
needs to know where he's trying to go, and he's got to get a sense of what his story is before he starts to tell it.
Yeah, he can't
So,
do the free, but
yeah,
his tendency is to want to just free flow
barf
it.
it all out, barf it all out, right?
Is
Um,
there anything productive with barfing it all out, then going back and fixing, or is that not good?
it can be if you have a sense of where you're going and you barf it out and then can fix it because you can see beginning, middle, end. He
Mhm.
sometimes doesn't see how it all connects together.
Mm, it's more random. Yeah.
Right. And so he needs more scaffolding. He needs more, here's where we're trying to go. Let's talk about how we build those pieces, right?
Mhm.
And I gave him my lecture on readers are lazy. You're going to tell them what you tell them, tell them, tell them, tell them, tell them what you told them. And when you take a turn or a move, you got to flag them and go, hey, get ready. I'm changing where we're going. So I give you a transitional tie so you
Mhm.
connect, right?
Yeah.
Um, so we would do more scaffolding in the writing. We would go back and review rules of grammar and mechanics,
Mhm.
and teach him some different paragraph formulas and work on developing how do I develop a thesis and then strong conclusions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in math,
Yeah, what are you gonna do for that?
oh, in math, so A, the algorithms are helpful, but some work needs to go back and be done in understanding more of number theory.
Deeper.
What is quantity? What is the base 10 system? Why is the base 10 system important? How does it differ from base 2, base 8, base 16? And anybody out there that does computer science knows what I'm talking about in that realm. Um, but we need to go back and backfill some holes in concepts. Um, and he absolutely needs a calculator. He also is somebody who would benefit from a trigger book, which I know is one of
Yeah,
your favorite things in the world. You want
yeah.
to explain what a trigger book is?
A trigger book is for people who have difficulty remembering. Basically, it allows you to have a book that says if how to add negative and positive numbers. Initially, when you present that to a student with these difficulties, they say, I don't remember.
I'll get it.
All they have to do is look at a page in their book and it shows them steps that, oh, yeah, I remember. So
Right.
it goes to the back of the brain and pulls that process
We
of,
put the model on the right and then how to work the model on the left. So
yeah,
here's a long division problem. Let me show you the steps that I did for that.
yeah,
Or just having, you know, here's adding fractions with like denominators. Here's adding fractions with unlike denominators. Here's multiplying fractions with like denominators. Here's multiplying fractions with unlike denominators. So that you've got the model there and it triggers the recall. Okay. Um,
is
he
that the orthographic processing piece of multi-step procedures that they can't hold on to in their head? Okay.
Right. And making sure that he's attending to operational signs, that he's making sure he's got superscript and subscript numbers and symbols and everything else, right? Like all the pieces are there and it's legible enough. So this is a kid that I want him to write big on scratch paper so that like if you write really small, it's really easy to lose things. So I want him on big sheets of paper, ideally with color, so that things pop out and he can see it and work through it that way.
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, he's super excited about entrepreneurial opportunities and creative problem solving.
Mhm.
And I see no reason that he can't go that direction and kind of play in that realm.
Yeah. Wow.
Uh, he has ADHD, he's treated for it, but he needs the executive function coach for time management. Time management is a major issue for him.
Oh.
He doesn't have a sense of how long time is.
Mm.
Loses track of time very easily.
Mm.
Um, and despite all of that, he's never really had any in-depth intervention until recently, but has done really well.
Wow.
He's,
That is
he's a determined, capable young man, and I'm excited to see where he goes.
yeah.
These things will not limit him because
Mhm.
he's not worried about how somebody will perceive it. He just figures out what workarounds work for him.
Yeah. Good.
So, really interesting questions, comments. Always love to hear from people. Let us know if you are enjoying these, puzzle through the evaluation, and we'll go from there. Thanks.
Thank you.